Hey guys, tonight we begin with the story of chocolate. Not the sweet foil-wrapped bar you're thinking of, but something older, wilder, and far more bitter. A journey that starts not in a factory, but in a steaming rainforest, with a fruit that holds a dark, magical secret. Imagine the thick, humid air of a jungle at dawn, the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. High in the canopy, strange, colorful pods, ruby red, deep yellow, vibrant orange, hang heavy from the trunks of gnarled trees. They look almost otherworldly, like something a wizard would grow. Inside, not sweet candy, but a slimy, tart pulp clings to a cluster of bitter beans. This is the cacao pod, and for the ancient peoples of the Americas, this was not a snack. It was a whisper from the gods. The first time someone cracked one open, tasted the shocking tartness of the pulp, and then, bravely, roasted the bitter seeds inside, they had no idea they were unlocking an obsession that would span continents and centuries. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations! You've just stepped into the world of the ancient Olmecs, around 1500 BCE, in the steamy lowlands of what is now Mexico. You are not here for a tourism brochure. You are here to witness a discovery. Forget everything you know about chocolate. There is no sugar here, no vanilla, no milk, just the raw, unadulterated, and frankly kind of nasty truth of the cacao bean. The Olmecs are believed to be the first to unlock its potential. They called it cacao. Sounds familiar, right? It's the root of the word we use today. But their chocolate was a world away from your after-dinner mint. Picture their process. It's not pretty. First, you haul these heavy, awkwardly shaped pods back to your village. You crack them open with a stone tool, the shell splintering with a damp crunch. Your hands are immediately covered in a sticky white pulp that clings to your fingers like glue. It's sweet and tart, like a faintly floral lychee, but it's not the prize. The prize is the dozens of purple-brown beans nestled inside, slimy and fresh. They're incredibly bitter, almost alarmingly so. If you bit into one now, you'd spit it out. It's not chocolate, not yet. The magic, the transformation, begins with fermentation. The beans, pulp and all, are scooped into piles, covered with leaves and left to sit. For days, in the tropical heat, they start to sweat, to bubble, to undergo a primordial stewing. The sugars in the pulp break down, the chemistry of the bean shifts, and the first, faint chocolatey aromas begin to emerge from the pile. It smells funky, like overripe fruit and vinegar and something deeply earthy. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's a necessary one. This is where the precursors to chocolate flavor are born, in this hot microbial dance. After the fermentation, the beans are dried in the sun, turning from purple to a dark brown. Then comes the fire. They're roasted in clay pots over a low flame. This is the moment of true alchemy. The heat coaxes out over 600 different flavor compounds, that bitter, astringent bite mellows. Rich, deep, roasty notes develop. The air fills with a scent that, for the first time, starts to resemble something we might recognize as chocolate, but darker, smokier, more complex. Now, the real work begins. The roasted beans are peeled, their thin shells discarded. The inner nibs, the heart of the operation, are collected, and then they are ground. This isn't a gentle process. It's a grindstone-on-grindstone affair, a back-breaking rhythmic crushing that could take hours. You're grinding them into a thick, gritty paste. Because of the high fat content, cocoa butter, the heat from the friction starts to melt the paste. It becomes a dark, oily, fragrant sludge. This is pure 100% chocolate liquor. It's solid at room temperature, but it melts on your skin, on your tongue. Now what did the Olmecs do with this thick, bitter paste? They didn't form it into little squares. They drank it. But this was no cozy hot cocoa. They would take this paste and mix it with water. Sometimes they added chili peppers. Sometimes they added wild honey or vanilla orchid pods, if they were lucky. But mostly it was water, chili and chocolate. They would pour the mixture from one vessel to another over and over to create a frothy head, which they considered the most desirable part. They believed this froth was the embodiment of the gods, a spiritual essence. So, you're an Olmec, sitting by a fire after a long day. Someone hands you a gourd of this concoction. You take a sip. It's cold, or maybe lukewarm. It's thick, almost gritty. It's intensely bitter with a deep roasted flavor that coats your tongue. Then the heat from the chili kicks in, a slow burn at the back of your throat. There's no sugar to soften the blow. This isn't a dessert. This is a ritual. This is medicine. This is a stimulant. The theobromine and caffeine in the beans give you a gentle, focused energy. You feel alert, awake. It's a functional drink, a sacred one. It connected them to the divine, to the earth that provided this strange, powerful fruit. The Olmecs passed this knowledge down, and it traveled, seeping into the cultures that would follow. But for them, it was a fundamental part of their world. The cacao tree itself was sacred, a bridge between the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. Its pods grew directly from the trunk, a phenomenon known as cauliflory, which seemed magical, as if the tree was offering its fruit directly from its heart. To consume chocolate was to consume a piece of that magic, to partake in a cycle of life that was both brutal and beautiful. It was a far cry from a heart-shaped box, but the obsession, the allure, started right here, in the heat and the humidity, with a bitter bean and a belief that it was something more. And this was just the beginning. The Olmecs laid the foundation, but it was the Maya who would turn this bitter drink into an art form, a currency, and a cornerstone of their entire civilization. But that is a story for another night. For now, just imagine the taste, the fire, the froth, and the first few people on Earth who looked at a slimy jungle bean and saw a god. Continuing on from the Olmec's foundational discovery, the sacred knowledge of cacao traveled north and seeped into the limestone cities and dense highlands of the Maya. Here, in a civilization obsessed with astronomy, calendar cycles, and the blood of kings, chocolate didn't just remain a ritual drink. It became a cosmic currency, a status symbol etched into the very stone of their temples, and the lifeblood of their social and spiritual worlds. Welcome to the classical Mayan world, between 250 and 900 AD. The air is different here, still thick with humidity, but scented with copal incense burning in temple courtyards, and the distinct smell of wet plaster from their towering pyramids. You are no longer in a simple village. You are in a bustling city-state like Tikal or Palenque, a place of stark contrast between the elite who live in stone palaces adorned with jade and the farmers who live in thatched huts at the city's edge. And in both worlds, though in very different ways, cacao is king. For the Maya, cacao, which they called chakha, literally hot water or bitter water, was woven into the fabric of existence. It was a gift from the gods themselves. Their creation myth, the Popol Vuh, tells the story of the hero twins and their descent into the underworld, and in some versions, the flesh of the first humans was made from maize and cacao. You literally could not be more central to a culture's identity than that. You are made of this stuff. So, how did the average Mayan get their chocolate fix? The process started much the same as with the Olmecs, but with even more ritual precision. Cacao orchards were valuable property. The trees were fragile, susceptible to disease, and required specific shade conditions, making the beans a genuine luxury item. Harvesting was a careful act. Using a stone blade attached to a long pole, a worker would skillfully slice the stem of a ripe pod, catching it before it plummeted to the ground and split open. The beans were still fermented and sun-dried, but the Maya took the roasting to a new level. They used specialized, long-handled clay pots that could be held directly over a fire, constantly shaking and turning the beans for an even roast. The aroma of roasting cacao would have been a familiar neighborhood scent, a signal that someone of importance was preparing for a ceremony or a feast. Then came the grinding. The Maya perfected the metate, a large, slightly curved stone slab, and the mano, a cylindrical rolling stone. The roasted, peeled cacao nibs were poured onto the metate, and the grinding began, a back-and-forth rhythmic motion that could take an hour or more to produce a smooth enough paste. This was often women's work, a daily or weekly chore in wealthy households. The sound of stone on stone, the gradual transformation of crunchy nibs into a glossy, liquid fat paste. This was the soundtrack of Mayan luxury. Now for the drink itself. The Maya had very specific tastes. While they still enjoyed the chili-spiked version, their most common preparation was a cold, frothy beverage. The chocolate paste was mixed with cold water. Sometimes they added maize for thickness and a starchy, porridge-like consistency, creating a drink called chuku-ha. Other common additions were allspice, vanilla, or the petals of the quilite flower for a hint of saffron-like color and flavor. But the real magic, the absolute non-negotiable element, was the froth. The Maya were froth connoisseurs. They believed the froth was where the spirit of the drink resided, the very essence of its pleasure and power. To achieve this, they employed an elaborate technique. They would pour the liquid from one cylindrical vessel to another, holding them high above their heads. It was a performance. Artwork on Mayan vases shows elegant ladies pouring streams of chocolate between tall, beautifully painted beakers, creating a rich, stable foam. This wasn't just for show. It aerated the drink, making it lighter and releasing more of its complex aroma. For the elite, this was a social ritual, a display of wealth and refinement. You didn't just drink chocolate, you performed it. And who got to drink it? Everyone, but not equally. For the common farmer, cacao was a rare treat, perhaps consumed at a festival or a wedding, a small taste of the divine. But for the nobility, it was a daily staple. Kings and lords are depicted on carved stelae and painted pottery, with vessels of frothing chocolate beside them. It was the beverage of diplomacy, served to visiting dignitaries to seal alliances. It was the fuel of the scribe, the thinker, the priest, staying awake during long nocturnal rituals to commune with the stars. It was even used as a restorative after bloodletting ceremonies, where nobles would pierce their tongues or genitals to offer blood to the gods. The caffeine and theobromine would have provided a welcome jolt after such an ordeal. Cacao beans themselves became a form of money. You could buy a rabbit for 10 beans, a pumpkin for 4, or a slave for 100. They were portable, durable, and universally desired, the perfect currency. Archaeologists have found cacao residues in spouted vessels from royal tombs, meant to sustain the ruler's soul on its journey to the afterlife. This wasn't just a drink, it was a passport to eternity. The world of the Maya was one of precise order, of calendars tracking vast cycles of time, of kings who were intermediaries between the earthly and the divine. And in the center of it all, in their palaces, their marketplaces, and their tombs, was chocolate. It was a food, a medicine, money, and a direct line to the gods. They elevated it from a rustic ritual to a cornerstone of high civilization. But empires rise and fall. The great Mayan cities were eventually abandoned, swallowed by the jungle. Yet the knowledge of cacao did not die. It was waiting, like a seed in the earth, for the next great civilization to discover it, a warlike, ambitious people from the arid valleys of central Mexico who would see in cacao not just a divine beverage, but a tool of empire. The Aztecs were coming, and they would take the chocolate obsession to a whole new and even more ruthless level. From the mystical world of the Maya, the legacy of cacao traveled north into the harsh, high-altitude basin of Mexico. Here, the Aztecs, a people forged in the fires of conquest and cosmic uncertainty, encountered the food of the gods. But for them, it was more than a spiritual delicacy. It was a weapon of empire, a measure of wealth, and a privilege so fiercely guarded that to misuse it was to risk everything. Welcome to Tenochtitlan, circa 1500. The air is startlingly different. It's thinner, cooler, carrying the smoky scent of countless reed fires burning on the lake, mixed with the distinct smell of a bustling, impossibly large city built on water. Canoes ply the canals, their hulls slicing through water that reflects the gleaming white stucco of pyramids and palaces. This is the heart of an empire, a place of brutal order and staggering grandeur. And in this world, cacao, or cacahuatl as they called it, was not for the faint of heart. The Aztecs couldn't grow cacao in their cool highlands. This was a strategic nightmare and a brilliant economic opportunity. Every single bean had to be imported from the conquered, sweltering lowlands of their empire, from places like Xoconochco, their prized cacao province. This meant cacao was instantly, intrinsically valuable. It was literally the fruit of conquest, a tangible reminder of the Aztecs' far-reaching power. The beans arrived in the great market of Tlatelolco, carried by long-distance traders called Pochteca, who were part merchant, part spy, part elite special forces. The rustle of beans in a sack was the sound of imperial economics. The Aztec relationship with cacao was deeply mythological and far darker than the Mayas. They believed the god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, had descended from heaven on a beam of a morning star, carrying a cacao tree stolen from the divine realms to gift to humanity. For this act of generosity, he was cast out by the other gods. So from the start, cacao was wrapped in a tale of divine theft and exile, a forbidden celestial treasure. This myth bled into its consumption. The drink itself was largely similar to the Mayas, a cold, bitter, frothy concoction of ground cacao, water and spices. Chili was still a favorite, but they also added a fascinating array of other flavorings. The ear flower, Cymbopetalum penduliflorum, for a floral, peppery note, liquid amber resin, honey from native stingless bees, and sometimes even a dash of bright red achiote for color. But the Aztecs took the Mayas' frothing obsession to a new level of artistry. They used a special wooden beater called a molinillo, a tool with loose rings that, when rolled rapidly between the palms, would create an incredibly thick, stable foam, a technique that would later captivate the Spanish. Now, here's the crucial part. Who was allowed to drink this celestial foam? The rules were strict and they were enforced. The commoner? Forget it. The average soldier? Not a chance. This was a drink for one group only. The elite, nobles, veteran warriors, high-ranking priests, and the long-distance Pochteca on state business. To consume cacao without the proper social rank wasn't just a faux pas. It was a transgression against the social and cosmic order. There are accounts of commoners being executed for impersonating nobles and drinking chocolate. Think about that the next time you casually unwrap a candy bar. Your afternoon snack could have been a capital offense. This exclusivity made cacao the ultimate status symbol. To be seen drinking it was to announce your power, your proximity to the emperor, your divine right to rule. This brings us to the most famous chocolate drinker of them all, the Huitlatoani, the emperor himself, Moctezuma II. Spanish chroniclers, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination, recorded the emperor's chocolate habits. He was said to consume nothing else before presiding over his judicial court. Not one cup, but dozens. Golden goblets of frothing cacahuatl were brought to him by attendants in an endless procession. He would sip it delicately, fortifying himself for the day's decisions. The Spanish were baffled. Why this bitter, cold drink? They didn't understand the caffeine's role in sharpening the mind, nor the sacred symbolism of each golden cup. They just saw a barbaric king with a bizarre, expensive habit. But for Moctezuma, it was a ritual of power. Each sip was a reminder that he alone had the right to consume the empire's most coveted treasure in such staggering abundance. And this is where cacao's dual nature in Aztec society becomes crystal clear. It was money. If the Maya used it occasionally for trade, the Aztecs built a microeconomy on it. The cacao bean was the small change of the empire. A single bean could buy a single large tomato or a fresh tamale. A handful could get you a rabbit for the stew pot. Need a new cloak? That'll be 100 beans. The ultimate status symbol, a full-grown fertile slave, could be yours for the price of 100 prime cacao beans. Counterfeiting was a constant problem. Unscrupulous merchants would fill empty cacao shells with mud or sand and seal them up, passing them off as the real thing. The rustle of a genuine bean in your hand was the sound of authenticity. So, an Aztec noble walking through the market was literally carrying a wallet in his pouch. He could feel his wealth, smell it. It was a system that made cacao ubiquitous, yet unattainable for most. A perfect tool for maintaining a rigid social hierarchy. The stage was now set. A civilization that saw cacao as divine currency and a brutal measure of status was about to collide with a group of men from across the ocean who saw it as, well, they didn't know what to make of it. But they were about to find out. And in doing so, they would change the destiny of chocolate forever. From the rigid, imperial world of the Aztecs, where cacao was power itself, the story of chocolate now pivots to a moment of violent cultural collision. The stage is still Tenochtitlan, but the air now carries new scents. The oily smell of Spanish armor baking in the sun, the strange aroma of European bodies, and the tension of two worlds about to smash into each other. And at the center of this clash was a bitter drink that the newcomers found frankly disgusting. It's 1519. Hernán Cortés and his band of conquistadors are being led into the heart of the Aztec capital. They are stunned. This isn't a city of savages. It's a metropolis more magnificent than any in Spain, a vision of white towers and bustling canals. They are received as guests, or perhaps as pawns, by Emperor Moctezuma himself, and in a hall of astounding wealth they are offered a taste of the empire's ultimate luxury. A servant presents Cortés with a golden goblet. Inside is a dark, frothy liquid. It's cold, it's unsweetened, it's spiced with chili and flowers the Spanish have never smelled before. Cortés, following Moctezuma's lead, takes a sip. His face beneath the helmet likely does not betray his true reaction, but his scribes and soldiers later wrote it down. They described the drink as a bitter drink for pigs, a strange and unpleasant concoction, something that was more medicine than food. They were baffled. Why would a king so powerful, surrounded by such gold, choose to drink this? They saw the value in the golden cup, but completely missed the value in the dark liquid it held. Their European palates, accustomed to wine, beer, and sweet honey, were utterly unprepared for the complex, bitter, and spicy profile of cacahuatl. But Cortés was, above all, a pragmatist. He might have spit the drink out in private, but he noticed everything. He saw Moctezuma consuming dozens of these golden goblets in a single sitting. He watched the intricate, respectful rituals surrounding its preparation and service. He learned, likely through his interpreter and consort La Malinche, that these little brown beans were used as money throughout the empire. His mind, always calculating, began to connect the dots. This bitter drink for pigs was not just a drink. It was the liquid form of Aztec power, economics, and religion. If he could control this, he could control the empire. The beans themselves, piling up in imperial storerooms, were a treasure as tangible as any chest of gold. When the eventual siege and fall of Tenochtitlan came, The looting wasn't just for golden idols, it was for sacks of cacao beans. The conquistadors literally consumed their enemies' currency. The first few decades after the conquest were awkward for chocolate in New Spain. The Spanish rulers replaced the Aztec elite, but they inherited their taste for cacao, albeit slowly and with significant modifications. The first and most revolutionary change: sugar. The Spanish had established sugar plantations in the Caribbean, and the sweet, crystalline substance was being shipped to the mainland. Some unknown, brilliant, or perhaps just desperate Spanish colonist, probably a nun or a monk in a colonial monastery, looked at a cup of bitter cacao and thought, "What this needs is a heaping spoonful of sugar." It was a culinary earthquake. Sugar didn't just mask the bitterness, it transformed the drink entirely. It tamed the chili heat into a warm, spicy undertone. It complemented the floral notes of the vanilla and earflower. Suddenly, the drink that was an acquired taste for Aztec nobles became a palatable, even delightful experience for the European tongue. The other major change was temperature. The Aztecs and Maya drank it cold, a practical choice in their hot climates. But the Spanish, like good Europeans, preferred their luxury beverages hot. They began serving chocolate warmed, perhaps inspired by their own traditions of mulled wine. A hot, sweet, spiced chocolate drink was born. It was a hybrid, a mestizo beverage, combining indigenous American ingredients with European tastes and African sugar. They also started adding old-world spices that were familiar to them: cinnamon from Sri Lanka, black pepper from India, aniseed. These spices, now arriving in global trade networks, blended with the Native American vanilla and chili to create an even more complex and comforting profile. But who was drinking it in these early colonial days? At first, it remained a drink for the upper echelons: the Spanish administrators, the wealthy Creole landowners, the Catholic bishops. It was a symbol that they had not only conquered the land, but had also co-opted its greatest luxury. They drank it from delicate Chinese porcelain cups instead of golden goblets, a display of their global trade connections. For the indigenous population, the meaning of chocolate shifted tragically. It was no longer a sacred privilege of their own rulers, but a taxable commodity, a drink they were often forced to produce for their new masters. The frothy cacahuatl of Moctezuma had become a sweet, hot chocolate, a small, simmering pot of cultural fusion and colonial power. It was still a marker of status, but now the status was defined by Madrid, not by Tenochtitlan, and this new, sweetened version was about to make a long journey across the Atlantic, where it would face its next great challenge: conquering the courts of Europe. From the fused, sweetened chocolate of colonial New Spain, the story now crosses the Atlantic, carried in the dark, fragrant holds of Spanish galleons. The bitter pig's drink that once repelled conquistadors has been transformed into a sweet, spiced luxury, and it's about to meet its most skeptical audience yet: the aristocrats, clerics, and royalty of Europe, a continent utterly unprepared for this exotic, stimulating invader. The first chocolate to arrive in Europe didn't go to a king's court. It went, ironically, to a monastery. In the mid-1500s, Spanish monks, particularly Cistercians and Jesuits, became the first European chocolate masters. They were the gatekeepers. Ships from Veracruz would arrive in Seville, and among the cargo of silver, cochineal dye, and exotic woods were sacks of precious cacao beans. These beans often ended up in monastic storerooms. Why the monks? They had the education to read the Latin and Nahuatl accounts of chocolate's properties. They had the quiet, controlled environments, their kitchens and scriptoriums, to experiment. And they had a pressing need, dealing with the rigid fasting rules of the Catholic Church. Was chocolate a food or a drink? If it was a food, it broke fasts. If it was a drink like wine, it was permissible. Theologians argued for decades. Monks secretly sipped it during long hours of prayer and copying manuscripts, finding the caffeine kept them alert and devout. They became the alchemists of this new substance, perfecting the grinding and sweetening processes, adding old-world spices like cinnamon, anise and ambergris to recipes that were closely guarded secrets. The scent of chocolate, once foreign to European stone cloisters, began to mingle with the smell of incense and old parchment. But chocolate couldn't stay hidden in monasteries forever. Its big break came through royal marriages. When the Spanish princess Maria Teresa married Louis XIV of France in 1660, she brought her love of chocolate with her to the French court. She reportedly arrived with her own personal maid, specifically trained in the art of preparing chocolate. Suddenly, at the glittering, absurdly formal court of Versailles, this dark, aromatic drink became the ultimate symbol of cosmopolitan taste. It was exotic, expensive and difficult to prepare, perfect for the aristocracy. It was served in delicate porcelain cups from China, a display of global power and refinement. The French, being the French, declared it an aphrodisiac. Casanova was said to prefer it to champagne for his seductions. It was the drink of intrigue, consumed in private salons, where political deals were made and illicit affairs were whispered about. Meanwhile, in England, chocolate took a different, more public route. It arrived not through a queen's dowry, but through merchants and apothecaries. In 1657, the first English chocolate house opened in London. Think of it as a 17th century coffee shop, but more exclusive, more expensive, and significantly more decadent. These were dark, woody, masculine spaces, filled with the smoke of clay pipes and the intense chatter of politicians, writers, and stock traders. For the price of a cup, you got a seat, the latest gossip, and a stimulating buzz that could last for hours. The clientele of these houses was rowdy and influential. At White's Chocolate House, aristocrats placed bets on everything from political appointments to which drop of rain would slide down the window pane first. The Cocoa Tree Chocolate House became a notorious hub for Tories. It was here that chocolate began to shed its purely medicinal image and become a social lubricant, a tool for business and debate. The English, ever pragmatic, even started adding milk to it, creating a milder, creamier version that appealed to a wider palate. But it wasn't all salons and stock tips. Chocolate faced fierce resistance. The church continued to debate its spiritual status. Doctors wrote pamphlets warning of its overheating properties, claiming it caused melancholia, fits, and immoral passions. Critics saw it as a decadent foreign vice that was softening European morals. Its very nature was mysterious and therefore suspicious. What was this bean that grew on trees? Why did it need so much sugar? For every aristocrat who saw it as the height of fashion, there was a preacher who saw it as a tool of the devil. This controversy, of course, only made it more desirable. To drink chocolate was to be modern, to be connected to the vast new worlds across the ocean, to be part of an elite that could afford such a strange and powerful luxury. It was a status symbol you could consume, a liquid testament to your wealth and worldliness. The stage was now set. Chocolate had infiltrated the highest echelons of European society, but it was still a handcrafted, labor-intensive luxury for the very few. The next great revolution wouldn't happen in a palace or a chocolate house, but in the smoky, clanging workshops of the Industrial Revolution, where machines would finally figure out how to turn this sacred drink into a solid, stable and accessible treat for the masses. From the private chambers of European royalty and monasteries, chocolate now descends into the gritty, chaotic and overwhelmingly masculine world of 17th century London. It's a city roaring back to life after plague and fire, a place where fortunes are made and lost in an afternoon, and where a new kind of social institution, the chocolate house, becomes the liquid caffeine for the engine of empire, politics, and scandal. Step inside White's Chocolate House on St. James's Street circa 1700, The air is thick enough to chew, a fog of tobacco smoke, coal dust from the hearth, the rich, waxy scent of melting chocolate, and the distinct odour of unwashed wigs and ambition. This isn't a delicate Parisian salon. This is a bear pit of Georgian England. The room is dark, panelled in oak, crowded with men of every stripe, dandies in silk waistcoats, naval officers smelling of salt and gunpowder, politicians with whispered secrets, and merchants whose pockets bulge with promissory notes. They are all here for one thing: chocolate. But not the chocolate we know. What arrives at your small, sticky table is a thick, potent, almost oily brew. It's served in a handleless earthenware cup, dark as a London night and just as mysterious. It's still heavily spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, sweetened with expensive cane sugar, and because this is England, sometimes fortified with a generous glug of port wine or brandy. You drink it not for delicate pleasure, but for fuel. This is a working man's luxury, if your work is gambling, gossiping, or governing the British Empire. The chocolate houses of London weren't just places to drink. They were the original social networks. Each house developed its own distinct personality and clientele, more rigid than any modern private club. White's, the most infamous, became the playground of the ton, the ultra-rich, ultra-aristocratic elite. Here, fortunes weren't just spent. They were vaporized over games of whist and faro. The famous betting book at White's records wagers on everything from the outcome of battles to which of two noblemen would die first. It was a world of breathtaking frivolity and staggering debt, all lubricated by endless cups of thick, stimulating chocolate. Then there was the Cocoa Tree Chocolate House, the preferred haunt of the Tories. In its dimly lit rooms, Jacobite sympathies were whispered, and plots against the Whig government were hatched over steaming cups. It was so politically charged that it eventually transformed into one of London's first proper gentlemen's clubs. On the other side of the political spectrum, the St. James's Chocolate House was the Whig stronghold. Here, the rising merchant class and progressive politicians debated free trade and constitutional monarchy, their ideas sharpened by the theobromine kick in their drinks. The preparation was a spectacle in itself. In the corner of each establishment stood the chocolate maker, a figure as important as the bartender in a modern pub. He presided over a bubbling array of copper pots and specialized equipment. The process was laborious. He'd grate a solid cake of chocolate, a compressed block of ground, sweetened cacao, into a pot of water or milk. Then, using a molinillo or a long wooden swizzle stick, he'd roll it furiously between his palms, creating the all-important froth. The rhythmic thrum-thrum-thrum of this process was the soundtrack of these establishments. He was part chemist, part performer, and absolutely essential to the experience. The quality of his froth could make or break a house's reputation. But this world had a strict, unspoken rule: no women allowed. These were bastions of male privilege and paranoia. Wives, daughters, and mistresses were barred, their absence allowing for the uniquely toxic blend of business, politics, and vice that flourished within. It was in these smoke-filled rooms that the South Sea bubble was inflated, that the Act of Union was debated, and that the modern concept of stock trading began to take shape. The London Stock Exchange literally grew out of coffee and chocolate houses. The chocolate was the legal stimulant that kept these engines of capitalism and corruption running late into the night. However, the golden age of the chocolate house was brilliant but brief. By the mid-18th century, a shift was occurring. The rising middle class began to see chocolate as an attainable luxury for the home. The houses, with their exclusive, often debauched atmospheres, began to seem old-fashioned. Many evolved into the more sedate, subscription-based gentlemen's clubs that still exist in London today. Others simply vanished. The world was changing. The Industrial Revolution was gathering steam in the north, and with it came new technologies and new tastes. The era of the dark, spicy liquid chocolate of the Georgian era was coming to a close, soon to be replaced by a new, smoother and far more democratic form of chocolate, one you could not just drink, but hold in your hand. The age of the chocolate bar was dawning, and it would begin not in a London chocolate house, but in a Dutch factory with a revolutionary new press. From the smoky, masculine chaos of London's chocolate houses, the story of chocolate now pivots to the cold, precise world of the Industrial Revolution. The era of the hand-whisked froth and the exclusive gentleman's club is about to be steamrolled by machinery, and in a Dutch factory in the 1820s, a quiet, chemical engineer named Konrad van Houten is about to perform an act of alchemy that will fundamentally change chocolate from a drink into something you can hold in your hand. The problem with chocolate, for centuries, was its stubborn, physical nature. It was half liquid, half solid, a greasy, unstable paste that refused to be tamed. The high fat content, the cocoa butter, made it spoil quickly, difficult to digest and impossible to mold into a smooth, consistent bar. It was a substance perpetually caught between two states. Van Houten, working in his father's chocolate business in Amsterdam, looked at this problem not as a chef but as an engineer. In 1828, he patented a revolutionary machine, the hydraulic cocoa press. Imagine a giant mechanical vice. Van Houten would take the roasted ground cacao beans, the chocolate liquor, and put this dark, oily paste into a powerful press. With immense pressure, the machine would squeeze the paste, and two distinct substances would emerge. On one side, a clear, yellowish aromatic fat dripped out, pure cocoa butter. On the other side, what was left was a dry, compressed cake of solid cocoa solids. This cake could be pulverized into a fine, dry, stable powder. This was the birth of what we know as cocoa powder. This was a monumental breakthrough. Cocoa powder was cheap, lightweight, and shelf-stable. For the first time, the middle classes could afford to buy chocolate simply by mixing this powder with hot water or milk and sugar at home. The bitter, expensive, labor-intensive drink of aristocrats was suddenly democratized. But Van Houten wasn't done. To make his cocoa powder mix more easily with water, he treated the cocoa solids with alkaline salts, a process later called Dutching. This not only improved mixability, but also darkened the powder's color and gave it a milder, less acidic flavor. This is the difference between natural cocoa powder and the darker, richer Dutch processed cocoa you can buy today. The man had literally re-engineered the flavor of chocolate. But the real magic, the true birth of the modern chocolate bar, came from what happened next with that leftover cocoa butter. For the first time, cocoa butter was a separate, refined ingredient. Chocolate makers now realized they could take that dry cocoa powder, mix it back with some of the extracted cocoa butter, and add sugar. The result was a smooth, pliable paste that could be poured into a mold. And because cocoa butter is a polymorphic fat, it solidifies into a stable, snappable form at room temperature. It held its shape. The first edible chocolate bar was born. It was still dark, gritty, and quite bitter by our standards, but it was a bar. You could unwrap it, break it, share it, and carry it in your pocket. This was a conceptual earthquake. Chocolate was no longer an event you drank, it was an object you possessed. The epicenter of this solid chocolate revolution shifted from the Netherlands to England. In 1847, the British company J.S. Fry & Sons, using Van Houten's press, became the first to mass-produce a molded chocolate bar for eating. It was called Chocolat délicieux à manger, eating chocolate. A few decades later, in 1866, another Quaker family, the Cadburys, began selling their own boxed chocolate assortments, marketing them as a luxurious yet wholesome treat. The Quaker connection is no coincidence. These families saw chocolate as a healthy, caffeine-laced alternative to alcohol, a way to promote temperance and moral uprightness. They were selling virtue in a fancy box. The experience of eating these first chocolate bars was nothing like today. They were coarse and grainy because the conching process to make them smooth hadn't been invented yet. The texture was like a gritty, hard fudge. The flavor was intensely dark and robust, a direct descendant of the mayan cacao, but now sweetened and solidified. It was an acquired taste, but a portable, shareable, and increasingly affordable one. The world of chocolate had been cracked open quite literally by a hydraulic press. The liquid age was over. The solid age had begun. But it was still missing one crucial element, one that would make it truly irresistible to the masses: milk. And that final creamy transformation was waiting just over the Alps, in the hands of a Swiss pharmacist who had a habit of tinkering with baby formula. From the clattering English factories where the first solid chocolate bars were born, our story now crosses the North Sea to the clean, methodical world of the Netherlands. Here, in a nation built on water management and precise engineering, chocolate is about to undergo its most fundamental transformation yet. One that will turn it from an artisanal luxury into a standardized, shelf-stable commodity accessible to nearly everyone. Welcome to Amsterdam in the 1820s. The air smells of salt, damp canals and something new, the rich, toasty aroma of cacao beans roasting on an industrial scale. This is the world of Coenraad van Houten, a man who isn't a chocolatier but a chemical engineer. He looks at the messy, unpredictable process of making chocolate and sees a series of problems to be solved. The chocolate of his day is still a greasy, unstable paste. It's difficult to digest, spoils relatively quickly, and most frustratingly for an engineer, it's infuriatingly inconsistent. One batch is oily, the next is gritty. Van Houten wants to standardize it, to break it down into its component parts and rebuild it as something better. His father, Casparus, had already been experimenting with chocolate, but Coenraad is about to push it into a new dimension with his hydraulic press. The machine itself is a marvel of brute force simplicity. Imagine a massive iron screw press. Workers load the dark, oily chocolate liquor, the pure ground cacao, into sturdy canvas bags. Then they turn a giant screw, applying immense pressure. You can hear the metal groaning, a deep, sustained creak as the press does its work. Slowly, inexorably, a clear, golden-yellow oil begins to weep from the bags, dripping into collecting pans. This is cocoa butter, the soul of chocolate's texture, now separated for the first time. What remains in the bags is a hard, dry, compacted cake of pure cocoa solids. It looks like a dark, aromatic brick. This simple act of separation is a revolution. By removing over half the natural fat, Van Houten has done two things. He has created a stable, non-greasy cocoa solid that can be pulverized into a fine powder, and he has created a valuable new ingredient, refined cocoa butter. The cocoa powder is the real game changer. For the first time in history, making a cup of chocolate doesn't require a molinillo, a metate, or hours of labor. A housewife in Liverpool or a clerk in Paris can simply spoon this dry, fragrant powder into a cup, add hot water or milk and sugar, and stir. It's instant, or at least as instant as the 19th century gets. Chocolate is no longer the domain of aristocrats or London clubmen. It's now a quick, affordable breakfast drink for the middle class. It's reliable, consistent, and cheap. Van Houten's factory can produce this powder in quantities that would have been unimaginable 50 years earlier, shipping it in tins across Europe and to the colonies. But he isn't finished. Van Houten notices that the natural acidity of cocoa makes it somewhat bitter and causes the powder to clump in liquid. So, he treats the cocoa beans or the nibs with alkaline salts, potassium or sodium carbonates, before pressing. This process, which becomes known as Dutching, neutralizes the acids and astringents. The result is a powder that is darker in color, richer in flavor, and far more soluble in water. It mixes smoothly, without the scum or separation that plagued earlier drinking chocolates. This is the birth of Dutch processed cocoa, a milder, darker and more versatile ingredient that will become the backbone of both drinking chocolate and later the entire baking industry. The impact of this Dutch innovation ripples out in every direction. The dry cocoa powder is lightweight and stable, making it perfect for long-distance trade. The extracted cocoa butter doesn't go to waste. It becomes the secret weapon for creating smoother, more malleable eating chocolate, as we saw with Fries and Cadbury. But perhaps most importantly, Van Houten's processes demystify chocolate. He turns it from a mysterious alchemical substance into a standardized industrial product. It can be analyzed, weighed, and sold by the gram. Its quality can be controlled. This is the necessary precondition for the true mass production that is to come. The Dutch haven't just made a new type of chocolate, they have created the blueprint for the modern chocolate industry. The stage is now set for the final, crucial ingredient that will turn this dark, bitter substance into the creamy, sweet comfort food we recognize today. The Swiss are waiting in the wings, and they have a dairy-based secret. From the methodical Dutch factories, where chocolate was broken down into its component parts, our story now climbs into the crisp, clean air of the Swiss Alps. Here, amid soaring peaks and verdant pastures, two separate innovations, one born from baby formula and the other from pure accident, are about to collide, creating the creamy, smooth chocolate that would become the world's standard for sweetness and texture. The year is 1867, and in the small town of Vevey, a man named Daniel Peter is having a career crisis. He's a candle maker, but his business is dying, quite literally, being replaced by the newfangled kerosene lamp. Next door, his friend Henri Nestlé is having more success. Nestlé has just invented something revolutionary, farine lactée, or milky flour, a powdered milk and cereal mixture designed to feed infants who couldn't be breastfed. It's saving lives and making Nestlé a small fortune. Peter, looking at his failing candle factory and Nestlé's success, has a crazy idea. What if he could combine Nestlé's milk powder with chocolate? Everyone knows milk and chocolate are a good combination when drunk hot. But no one has managed to make a solid milk chocolate bar. The problem is water. Fresh milk is about 88% water. When you try to add it to chocolate, which is mostly fat, you get a nasty, grainy, spoiled mess that molds within days. It's a culinary impossibility. But Nestlé's milk powder has had almost all the moisture removed. Peter looks at that dry, stable powder and sees the solution. He spends the next 8 years in his workshop, a man obsessed, trying to get the ratios right. He's not an engineer like Van Houten. He's more of a persistent tinkerer, working through trial and error, batch after failed batch. The air in his workshop smells of burnt milk, sour chocolate, and desperation. Finally, in 1875, he cracks it. By carefully combining cocoa, cocoa butter, sugar, and Nestlé's powdered milk, he creates the world's first stable, solid milk chocolate bar. It's a revelation. The harsh, bitter edge of dark chocolate is now softened by the creamy, caramelized notes of the milk powder. It's sweeter, milder, and far more approachable. Peter calls his company modestly Peter's Chocolate. He has just invented the gateway drug for chocolate addiction, but there's still a problem. Even Peter's milk chocolate is gritty. All chocolate at this time has a coarse, sandy texture because the sugar and cocoa particles aren't ground finely enough. The machinery of the day can only do so much. Enter Rodolphe Lindt, a chocolatier in Bern. In 1879, he buys an inefficient chocolate factory. The story goes that one Friday evening, a frustrated Lindt leaves his factory in a hurry, forgetting to turn off a machine, a special granite roller and trough used for grinding chocolate. He doesn't return until Monday morning. When he walks in, he expects to find a ruined, burned-out mess. Instead, he finds something miraculous. The machine, now called a conche, because its trough resembled a shell, has been running for over 72 hours, constantly agitating and aerating the chocolate. Instead of being gritty and coarse, the chocolate has become incredibly smooth, velvety and liquid. It flows like silk. The extended grinding has pulverized the sugar and cocoa particles to a fineness never before achieved. But more importantly, the constant motion and aeration have driven off volatile acids and unpleasant flavors, mellowing the chocolate and allowing its true, complex notes to shine. Lindt tastes it. It's unlike anything he or anyone else has ever experienced. He calls his new creation chocolate fondant, melting chocolate. It literally melts on the tongue, releasing its flavor all at once, without any grittiness. It's a textural revolution. The Swiss now have both pieces of the puzzle, milk powder for sweetness and creaminess, and conching for unparalleled smoothness. They combine them with ruthless efficiency. By the turn of the 20th century, companies like Peter Nestlé, who eventually went into the chocolate business himself, and Suchard are dominating the global chocolate market. They build their factories in the Alps, not just for the scenery, but for the cool, dry air, which is perfect for chocolate production. The Swiss milk chocolate bar becomes a symbol of quality, precision, and luxury. It's no longer a bitter stimulant or a gritty health food. It's a pure, creamy indulgence. The world falls in love. This Swiss mastery, the marriage of milk and smoothness, would define chocolate for the next century and create the template for the candy bars that would soon conquer America. But as this sweet, creamy revolution spread, it carried with it a bitter aftertaste, one rooted in the sun-scorched cacao farms of the colonial world where the beans themselves were grown. From the pristine Swiss Alps, where chocolate achieved its peak of creamy refinement, our story now crosses the Atlantic to a nation that would transform it once more. Not through delicate craftsmanship, but through sheer scale efficiency and a relentless focus on the everyday consumer. In America, chocolate was about to shed its European elegance and become a democratic, portable, and unmistakably mass-market phenomenon. The air in late 19th century America smells of coal smoke, industry, and boundless ambition. In a small Pennsylvania town called Derry Church, a man named Milton Snavely Hershey is failing, repeatedly. His attempts at starting a caramel business have cratered. But on a trip to the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, he witnesses something that changes everything, a demonstration of German chocolate-making machinery. He isn't captivated by the artistry, he's captivated by the machinery's potential for volume. He buys the entire setup and ships it to Pennsylvania. Hershey looks at the European model of fancy, expensive chocolate for the elite, and sees a dead end. He envisions something else entirely, a chocolate bar for the millions. A chocolate bar so affordable and consistent that a factory worker, a farmer, or a child could buy one with their spare change. He isn't trying to make the best chocolate in the world. He is trying to make the most chocolate in the world. His first task is to crack the recipe. European milk chocolate, with its delicate powdered milk, is too expensive and fussy for his vision. So, Hershey and his team develop a new process, one that would become his secret weapon. They take fresh, liquid milk and sugar and cook it slowly until it caramelizes, condensing it into a thick, sticky, tan-colored paste. This Hershey's process gives the milk a distinct, slightly tangy, cooked flavor, a flavor that would become synonymous with American chocolate for over a century. This milk paste is then mixed with cocoa beans sourced from various locations, creating a consistent, shelf-stable, and most importantly, cheap milk chocolate. Purists, especially in Europe, are horrified. They call it crude, acidic, and industrial. And they're not entirely wrong, but Hershey isn't selling to purists, he's selling to America. Then comes the true revolution, the assembly line. Hershey looks at Henry Ford's model for automobile production and applies it to chocolate. In his newly built, monumental factory in the town he renamed Hershey, The process is a symphony of coordinated motion. Beans are roasted in vast rotating drums. The shells are removed by giant vacuums. The nibs are ground between massive granite rollers. The chocolate liquid is conched, but for a fraction of the time the Swiss would deem acceptable. Then it's tempered, carefully cooled and reheated to give it a shiny snap, and poured into automated molds. The molds travel on conveyor belts through a cooling tunnel. At the end, machines automatically wrap the bars in foil and paper. The entire town smells like a giant vat of warm, slightly sour milk chocolate. It's not a subtle scent, it's the smell of an industry. Hershey isn't just making chocolate, he's building an ecosystem. He builds houses for his workers, a school for orphans, a park, and even streetlights shaped like Hershey's kisses. The company town is a utopian vision, or perhaps a benevolent dictatorship, built entirely on the promise of an affordable candy bar. And what bars they are. In 1900, Hershey introduces the iconic Hershey's Milk Chocolate Bar. It's not complex, it's not subtle. It's a straightforward hit of sugar, cocoa, and that distinctive tangy creaminess. Then, in 1907, comes the even more revolutionary Kiss. A small, teardrop-shaped piece of chocolate, individually wrapped in a tiny plume of silver foil, deposited by a machine that goes plop, wrap, all day long. The Kiss is genius. It's a single, guilt-free bite of chocolate. It's affordable, portable, and shareable. It's candy as impulse buy. Other American companies follow suit. The Mars bar, with its nougat and caramel, appears in the 1920s, creating the combination bar category. Chocolate is no longer just chocolate, it's a delivery system for caramel, nougat nuts, and crisped rice. It becomes a meal replacement, an energy boost, a small, sweet reward for making it through the day. The American candy bar, born from industrialization and marketing savvy, had conquered the national palate. But this explosion of cheap, accessible sweetness came with a cost, one that was hidden far from the cheerful wrappers and smiling advertisements in the tropical colonies where the cacao beans were grown. From the cheerful American factories where chocolate became an everyday luxury, our journey now turns to the sun-scorched fields where this sweetness began, the cacao farms of the colonial world. While Europe and America developed a taste for chocolate, the true cost was being paid in blood, sweat, and stolen lives on plantations thousands of miles away, where the magical bean was stripped of its sacred origins and transformed into a commodity built on exploitation. The year is 1900. The air in a cacao plantation on the island of São Tomé, off the coast of West Africa, is thick with humidity and despair. It smells of fermenting cacao pulp, sweat, and the faint metallic scent of fear. This Portuguese colony has become one of the world's largest cacao producers, feeding the insatiable demand from Cadbury and other major European chocolate makers. But the trees here aren't tended by free farmers. They're worked by forced laborers, many of them from Angola and other parts of Portugal's African empire, under a system that is slavery in everything but name. They're called contract workers, but their contracts are meaningless. They were often kidnapped or tricked with false promises, then shipped across the ocean in conditions reminiscent of the Middle Passage. Once on the plantation, they're trapped. The work is relentless from dawn until dusk. Men, women, and even children use long, curved knives to harvest the heavy cacao pods, their hands covered in sticky white pulp that attracts swarms of insects. They break open the pods with machetes, their fingers nicked and scarred from the tough shells. Then comes the fermentation, scooping the slimy beans into sweating piles, turning them in the oppressive heat, the acidic smell burning their nostrils. There are no protective gloves, no clean water, no rest in the shade. The overseers watch with whips, not molinillos. The average life expectancy for a worker here is less than 5 years after arrival. They die from disease, malnutrition, or sheer exhaustion. This isn't ancient history. This is the reality as the 20th century dawns. Meanwhile, back in England, the Quaker chocolate magnates of Cadbury are sipping their ethically sourced tea in comfortable boardrooms. They pride themselves on their progressive values and temperance movement ideals. But by 1901, rumours begin to reach them. Journalists like Henry Nevinson travel to São Tomé and return with horrific accounts. The Cadbury family is faced with a moral crisis. They send their own investigator, Joseph Burt, who confirms the worst. The cacao they've been buying for years is drenched in blood. But here's the uncomfortable truth. They do nothing. For nearly 8 years they continue to buy from São Tomé while quietly investigating alternatives. Why? Because the beans are cheap, the supply is reliable, and their business depends on it. It's not until 1909, after public pressure mounts, that Cadbury finally boycotts São Tomé cacao. The delay is a stain on their supposed Quaker ethics, a lesson in how even the most virtuous companies can look away when profits are on the line. But the story doesn't end there. As the 20th century progresses, the epicenter of cacao production shifts to the Gold Coast, modern-day Ghana. Here, the British colonial administration promotes cacao farming among local peasants. It seems like an improvement, smallholder farmers growing their own crops. But it creates a different kind of trap. These farmers become entirely dependent on the volatile global price of cacao. They have no control over what European and American companies will pay for their beans. A price crash could wipe out a family's entire livelihood. And the work is still brutally hard. Whole families, including young children, labor in the fields. This is where the complex issue of child labor in the chocolate industry begins to take root. Not as formal slavery, but as economic necessity born from poverty and unequal global trade. The farmers who grow the beans that make millionaires in Europe and America often can't afford to buy the chocolate bars themselves. Yet, even in this bleak landscape, there are stories of quiet resistance and resilience. Figures like Tete Kwashi, a Ghanaian blacksmith who is credited with bringing the first cacao beans to Ghana from Fernando Po in 1879. He wasn't a colonial agent. He was a local innovator who saw potential. He planted the seeds, literally and figuratively, for what would become the backbone of Ghana's economy. He represents the other side of the story, the agency and ingenuity of African farmers who, despite the oppressive systems around them, mastered the cultivation of this difficult crop and built communities around it. So when you unwrap a chocolate bar today, you're holding the end product of this complicated, often painful history. The sweetness on your tongue carries the bitter aftertaste of colonial exploitation, ethical compromises, and ongoing economic inequality. The cacao bean had traveled from sacred ritual to royal courts to industrial factories, but in the process it had become entangled with some of the darkest chapters of human exploitation. And as we'll see next, this legacy would continue to shape the industry in ways that still challenge us today. From the sun-baked cacao fields, where chocolate's bitter origins were rooted, our story now marches onto the global stage of the 20th century's greatest conflicts. As the world descended into war, not once, but twice, chocolate underwent its most dramatic transformation yet, shedding its identity as a mere treat to become a tactical weapon, a psychological tool, and a tiny, edible piece of home for millions of soldiers facing the unthinkable. The year is 1943. The air in a landing craft approaching a Pacific island smells of salt, diesel, and pure human fear. In the pocket of a young Marine, wrapped in waxed paper, is a dense brown bar. It's not a Hershey bar meant for a child's lunchbox. This is the U.S. Army's D-ration bar, and it's a different beast entirely. Developed by Hershey's at the request of the War Department, this bar was engineered to survival specifications. It had to weigh just 4 ounces, be able to withstand temperatures of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and taste just a little better than a boiled potato. Mission accomplished. The D-ration bar was famously, almost heroically, bad. It was gritty, chalky, and purposefully minimally sweetened because sugar was also rationed. Its primary ingredient was chocolate liquor, fortified with oat flour and cocoa butter, and it was so hard, soldiers often had to shave pieces off with their knives. Some manuals suggested eating it slowly, over 30 minutes, like a terrifying, chocolate-flavored lozenge. The joke among GIs was that the only way to eat it was to discard the chocolate and eat the wrapper. But here's the thing, it worked. It provided 600 calories of emergency energy, and its high melting point meant it could survive in a soldier's pack from Normandy to New Guinea. It wasn't meant to be enjoyed, it was meant to sustain. And in the hell of combat, that was enough. But the military understood that morale was as important as calories. Alongside the dreaded D-ration came the more palatable Hershey's Tropical Bar and the famous Field Ration D bars. These were closer to normal chocolate, still formulated to resist melting, and given to soldiers as part of their regular rations. The sound of a wax paper wrapper being torn open in a muddy foxhole became a small moment of comfort, a sensory reminder of a safer, sweeter world. The US government bought so much chocolate during W8 that it became a standard part of the American soldier's identity. It was included in K rations, distributed by Red Cross workers, and even dropped as a goodwill gesture to liberated villages. Chocolate became a symbol of American abundance and generosity, a powerful piece of propaganda you could eat. Meanwhile, back on the home front, chocolate took on a different role. It became a scarce, precious commodity. With cocoa beans classified as essential war material, civilian chocolate supplies dwindled to almost nothing. In Britain, chocolate was rationed from 1942 onwards. The familiar chocolate bars of the pre-war era shrank, changed their recipes, or vanished entirely. What remained was often a pale, waxy imitation, sweetened with whatever was available. For children growing up during the war, a single chocolate bar became a mythical treasure, hoarded and savoured for weeks. Housewives saved their ration coupons for special occasions, using precious cocoa powder to make simple puddings that tasted more of memory than of luxury. The very scarcity of chocolate made it more emotionally potent than ever before. Baking a chocolate cake for a soldier on leave wasn't just dessert. It was an act of love and patriotism, a small defiance against the austerity of war. The war also spurred another chocolate innovation, one that would outlast the conflict itself: M&Ms. Inspired by seeing soldiers in the Spanish Civil War eating chocolate pellets encased in a hard sugar shell, Forrest Mars Sr. created a candy that melts in your mouth, not in your hand. Partnering with Bruce Murray, son of Hershey's president, he secured a contract to supply the military with these durable, portable candies. The hard shell prevented melting, making them perfect for troops in various climates. After the war, M&Ms were sold to the public, becoming one of the most successful candies in history, a direct legacy of military necessity. In the grimmest of circumstances, chocolate revealed its dual nature once again. For the soldier, it was both practical fuel and psychological comfort. For the civilian, it was a longed-for luxury and a symbol of normalcy. For the corporations, it was a patriotic duty and a business opportunity. The war had stripped chocolate back to its essential purpose, not as a gourmet experience, but as a fundamental human comfort. It had been to hell and back, and it had done its duty. And as the world emerged from the rubble and began to rebuild, chocolate would ready itself for its next great campaign. Not in the trenches, but in the brand new battlefield of the television screen and the supermarket aisle. From the battlefields and ration books where chocolate served as both survival tool and comfort, our story now enters the gleaming, optimistic world of the post-war economic boom. As nations rebuilt and prosperity spread, chocolate underwent its most psychological transformation yet, shedding its practical wartime image to become a product sold not on necessity, but on desire, fantasy, and carefully manufactured brand personalities that would embed themselves deep in the modern consciousness. The year is 1955. The air in an American suburban living room smells of roast dinner, furniture polish, and the warm glow of a cathode ray tube. A family gathers around their new television set, a proud symbol of their middle-class status. The screen flickers to life, and between segments of I Love Lucy, a commercial appears. An animated rabbit in a magician's hat taps a chocolate bar, and it multiplies. A jingle catches in your head, simple, repetitive, impossible to forget. This is the new battlefield for chocolate, the American mind. After the deprivation of war, the Western world was ready to consume, and chocolate companies were ready to sell. But they weren't just selling a food product anymore. They were selling an idea. Happiness, comfort, love, reward. The chocolate bar itself was becoming secondary to the feeling it promised to deliver. The strategies were psychological masterstrokes. Take Cadbury's Dairy Milk in the UK. In 1955, they introduced the glass and a half campaign. The visual was genius, a generous, unstoppable pour of rich, liquid milk cascading into a bar of chocolate. It wasn't about the cocoa, it was about the purity and wholesomeness of the milk. That single, simple image, repeated for decades, burned into the public's mind that Cadbury was not just chocolate, but goodness itself. It was a promise of quality you could see. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, Toblerone leveraged its unique identity. The triangular bar, inspired by the Matterhorn, wasn't just a shape, it was a souvenir. Eating a Toblerone was a tiny, affordable vacation to the Swiss Alps, a taste of European sophistication and mountain purity. The packaging even hid a bear in the mountain design, a little secret for the observant consumer. You weren't just buying chocolate, you were buying into a story. But the Americans took branding to its most ruthless, emotional extreme. Mars turned the Milky Way bar into a ticket to escape, the sweet you can eat between meals. In a society increasingly worried about weight and nutrition, this was a rebellious promise of guilt-free pleasure. Then came the masterstroke. M&M's, melts in your mouth, not in your hand. This wasn't just a description. It was a solution to a problem most people didn't know they had. It spoke to cleanliness, convenience, and modern, mess-free living. It made other chocolates seem primitive and clumsy by comparison. But the most powerful branding of all was reserved for special occasions. The Whitman sampler and Russell Stover boxes became the universal language of romance, apology, and obligation. The elaborate boxes, with their detailed maps guiding you to each cream and nougat, turned chocolate giving into a ritual. To receive one was a statement. To give one was to communicate feelings you might not have the words for. The pressure was immense. The wrong choice from the guide map could spell romantic disaster. The tools of this mass persuasion were Jan Schinde. Television commercials used animation, catchy jingles, and relatable scenarios to create instant brand recognition in children and adults alike. Print ads in glossy magazines showed perfectly manicured families sharing chocolate in spotless kitchens, linking the product inextricably with the post-war domestic ideal. Supermarkets offered endless, brightly colored rows of choices, a stark contrast to the bare shelves of just a decade earlier. The chocolate bar was no longer a rare luxury or a functional ration. It was an impulse buyer reward for a good report card, a peace offering after argument, a small affordable indulgence in a world that was suddenly full of things to want. This era created the chocolate giants and the brand loyalties that would define the rest of the century. Children who grew up watching those commercials would grow into adults who instinctively reached for the same familiar bar. The landscape was set. But as chocolate became more embedded in daily life, a new question began to whisper at the edges of this sugary paradise. Was this sweet comfort actually good for us? The age of guilt was dawning, and chocolate was about to find itself on trial, its very nature debated by doctors, nutritionists, and the increasingly health-conscious public. The post-war party was over, and the health hangover was about to begin.
From the laboratory where we unraveled chocolate's chemical poetry, our journey now takes us to small, sun-drenched workshops and urban factories where a revolution is brewing. In the shadow of industrial chocolate giants, a new generation of makers is turning back the clock, rejecting mass production to return chocolate to its artisanal roots, one carefully sourced bean at a time. The year is 2005. The air in a converted garage in Brooklyn smells different than in a Hershey factory. There's no overwhelming sweetness, no industrial cleaner. Instead, the scent is pure and focused, the rich, toasty aroma of a single batch of cacao beans from the Piura region of Peru, roasting in a modified coffee roaster. This is the heart of the bean-to-bar movement. The people here aren't factory managers, they're obsessives. They wear aprons, not lab coats. They taste beans the way sommeliers taste wine, discussing terroir and finishing notes with a seriousness that would make a Swiss chocolatier blush. They are part of a quiet rebellion against a century of chocolate homogenization. Their mission is simple but radical, to prove that chocolate shouldn't all taste the same, and that the person who makes it should know exactly where it came from and who grew it. The bean-to-bar process is a return to fundamentals, but with modern precision. It starts not with a bulk commodity purchase, but with a relationship. These modern makers often travel to cacao farms themselves, to places like Belize or Madagascar. They walk the orchards with the farmers, discussing fermentation techniques and drying times. They're not just buying beans, they're buying a story, a specific taste of a specific place. Back in their workshops, the process is transparent, almost meditative. The beans are sorted by hand, discarding the flat, broken or under-fermented ones, something an industrial plant would never have time for. The roasting is light and careful, designed to highlight the beans' innate flavors rather than obliterate them with a uniform char. The winnowing, cracking, and grinding happen on a human scale. The sound isn't a factory roar, but the steady hum of a small stone grinder, sometimes running for days to achieve the perfect silken texture. There are no artificial vanillins, no emulsifiers, no vegetable fats. The ingredient list is a purist's dream: cacao beans, cane sugar, sometimes a bit of extra cocoa butter. That's it. The chocolate is a direct expression of the bean itself. This movement has created a new chocolate geography. You can now taste a bar made from wild, fruity nacional beans in Ecuador and taste the difference from a bar made from robust, earthy amolinado beans in Ghana. Companies like Taza Chocolate in Massachusetts took inspiration from Mexican traditions, stone grinding their chocolate to create a deliberately gritty, textured experience that screams of authenticity. Others, like Dandelion Chocolate in San Francisco, treat single-origin beans like precious gems, making minimalist bars that are 70%, 80%, even 100% cacao, challenging the very definition of what chocolate should be. This isn't chocolate for mindless snacking. It's chocolate for tasting, for contemplating, for experiencing. But this revolution comes with a price tag, both literal and philosophical. A bean 2-bar chocolate bar can cost 5 times more than a mass-produced equivalent. You're paying for the direct trade with farmers, the small batch production, the hands-on labor. You're paying for a story, and you're paying for a taste that is variable, unpredictable, and alive. Sometimes a batch from the same farm can taste different from one year to the next. For the makers, this isn't a flaw, it's the point. It means the chocolate is real, connected to the land and the weather and the people who nurtured it. This artisanal revival has done more than just create expensive chocolate for foodies. It has started to change the entire industry's conversation. It has forced the big players to consider transparency, to create their own premium lines, to at least pay lip service to ethical sourcing. It has reminded consumers that chocolate isn't just a monolithic, sweet substance, but an agricultural product with a vast and varied potential. The bean-to-bar movement, in its own small, stubborn way, is re-enchanting chocolate. Stripping away a century of marketing and industrialization to return to the magic that the Olmecs and Maya first discovered in the jungle. It's a full-circle moment in a 4,000-year journey. And as we look to the future, this respect for the bean, the farmer, and the craft may just be the key to chocolate survival in a changing world.
From the quiet workshops of the artisanal revival, where chocolate regained its soul, our story now bursts onto the global stage of popular culture. The silver screens, festival grounds, and collective imagination, where chocolate transformed from mere food into myth, metaphor, and shared celebration. The year is 1971. The air in a movie theater smells of stale popcorn and anticipation. On screen, a man in a purple velvet coat leads a child through a landscape where chocolate rivers flow and edible flowers bloom. This is Willy Wonka's factory, and for generations of children watching, this would become the definitive chocolate fantasy. Gene Wilder's Wonka isn't just a candy maker, he's a wizard, a trickster god, ruling over a kingdom of pure imagination where chocolate is the central magic. The film did something remarkable. It took the industrial process we explored in Hershey and made it mythical. The chocolate waterfall wasn't just impressive, it was a symbol of endless abundance, childhood wish fulfillment, and the dark, slightly dangerous allure of too much sweetness. Then, in 2000, another film would offer a different chocolate fantasy. Chocolate gives us Vianne, a mysterious woman who opens a chocolate shop in a repressed French village. Here, chocolate isn't just candy, it's liberation, sensuality, and rebellion against tradition. Each piece she crafts is personalized magic, awakening desires and breaking down prejudices. The film plays with the ancient idea of chocolate as an aphrodisiac and transforms it into a metaphor for living fully. These films, and dozens like them, cemented chocolate's role in our collective psyche. It's the food of fantasy, the taste of transformation, the edible symbol of everything forbidden and wonderful. But chocolate's cultural presence isn't confined to fiction. Across the globe, communities gather to worship at the altar of cacao in massive, vibrant festivals. In Perugia, Italy, the air during Eurochocolate is thick with the scent of 10,000 melting bars. The entire medieval city becomes a temple to cocoa. Artists carve statues from solid chocolate, replicas of David, entire nativity scenes, life-sized cars. You can attend a chocolate massage workshop or watch a chef create a pasta dish using cocoa in the sauce. It's a sensory overload, a celebration of chocolate's versatility that would make an Aztec priest's head spin. Meanwhile, in London, the chocolate show offers a more curated but equally obsessive experience. The sound of tempering chocolate, the rhythmic scraping against marble, mixes with the chatter of hundreds of attendees sampling single-origin bars from Madagascar, Colombia, and Vietnam. It's a pilgrimage for foodies, a place where the bean-to-bar revolution meets the mainstream. Then there are the smaller, more peculiar tributes. In the town of St. Stephen, New Brunswick, they celebrate the Chocolate Fest by dropping a giant chocolate bar from the sky. In Barcelona, the Museu de la Xocolata displays everything from chocolate monuments to chocolate versions of famous cartoon characters. These festivals and museums do more than just sell chocolate. They create community around a shared obsession. They are the modern equivalent of the Mayan ceremonies and London chocolate houses, places where people gather not just to consume, but to experience, to learn, to connect over this magical substance. Chocolate's cultural footprint extends beyond festivals and films into our daily rituals. It's the heart-shaped box on Valentine's Day, a tradition that began with Richard Cadbury's clever marketing in the 19th century. It's the chocolate Easter bunny, a bizarre fusion of pagan fertility symbols and Christian celebration. It's the Halloween candy bar, the universal currency of trick or treat. Chocolate has become the default language for celebration, consolation, and affection. We give it as a reward, as an apology, as a gesture of love. We've assigned it emotional weight that far exceeds its nutritional value. A box of chocolates is never just a box of chocolates. It's a message, and like all messages, it can be misunderstood. The wrong kind, the cheap kind, can speak volumes about what you really think. This cultural saturation has made chocolate one of the most recognizable and beloved foods on the planet. It has starred in our dreams, defined our holidays, and given us a shared vocabulary of comfort and joy. But as chocolate cemented its place in our hearts and cultures, a new conversation began to emerge. One that questioned what this love affair was doing to our bodies. The celebration was about to be interrupted by the wellness movement, and chocolate would have to defend its honor in the court of public opinion. From the silver screens and festive celebrations where chocolate cemented its place as cultural comfort food, our story now enters the stark, fluorescent-lit world of modern health consciousness. The same substance that was once prescribed as medicine and revered as sacred is now on trial, caught between conflicting studies, marketing claims, and our own gnawing guilt about what we put in our bodies. The year is 2003. The air in a nutrition lab smells of antiseptic and anxiety. A researcher in a white coat is studying blood samples from subjects who have just consumed dark chocolate. The results are surprising. The flavonoids in cocoa, specifically epicatechin, appear to be improving vascular function, lowering blood pressure, even reducing the risk of heart disease. The news spreads like wildfire. Suddenly, the same chocolate that was once dismissed as empty calories is being rebranded as a superfood. Headlines scream, "Chocolate is good for you." Supermarket shelves fill with chocolate bars boasting 70%, 80%, even 90% cocoa content. The higher the percentage, the more virtuous you feel. This is the great chocolate paradox of the 21st century. The same food that makes you feel guilty also promises to make you live longer. But let's be honest about what's actually in most of the chocolate we eat. That milk chocolate bar you're craving? It's often less than 30% cocoa. The rest is sugar, milk powder, and emulsifiers. The health benefits vanish under a mountain of processed sweeteners. Even the healthy dark chocolate bars are a nutritional minefield. The flavanol content, the very compounds responsible for those heart-healthy benefits, is often destroyed during processing. The alkalizing process that makes cocoa powder dark and mild, it strips away up to 90% of the flavonoids. So that superfood dark chocolate bar might be little more than bitter sugar with good PR. The industry walks a fine line, hinting at health benefits while carefully avoiding making any direct medical claims that would attract regulatory scrutiny. Then there are the other substances in chocolate that have fascinated scientists for decades. Theobromine, that gentle stimulant, does more than just keep you alert. It's a known cough suppressant, sometimes more effective than codeine. The small amounts of caffeine provide a mild boost. And then there's the psychological effect. The simple pleasure of eating something delicious triggers the release of endorphins, those natural feel-good chemicals in your brain. Is chocolate actually an antidepressant? Not clinically. But the comfort it provides is real, even if it's temporary. The problem comes when we try to medicate our emotions with an entire bag of mini candy bars. The sugar crash that follows the initial high can leave you feeling worse than before. Meanwhile, the wellness industry has spawned its own chocolate counterculture. Raw chocolate advocates insist that heating cocoa beans above 118 degrees Celsius destroys their enzymes and nutritional value. They sell cold-pressed cocoa nibs and raw chocolate bars at premium prices, promising maximum health benefits. Then there's the sugar-free revolution, chocolate sweetened with stevia, monk fruit, or erythritol, catering to the keto and diabetic markets. Some of these alternatives leave a strange, cooling aftertaste that purists find unsettling. And let's not forget the functional chocolate trend. Bars fortified with probiotics, adaptogens, or even CBD, turning what was once a simple treat into a delivery system for wellness trends. The truth about chocolate and health is, like most things in nutrition, complicated and deeply personal. For the Aztecs, it was a sacred stimulant. For the Victorians, it was a digestive aid. For us, it's become a psychological battleground. We weigh the antioxidant content against the sugar, the heart benefits against the calorie count, the pleasure against the guilt. We've medicalized what was once a spiritual experience. The modern chocolate eater is caught between two voices, one whispering indulgence and the other shouting moderation. Perhaps the healthiest relationship with chocolate isn't about counting flavonoids or avoiding sugar, but about rediscovering what the Maya understood, that chocolate is meant to be savored, not calculated, experienced, not analyzed. Because sometimes the greatest health benefit isn't measured in blood pressure, but in simple, uncomplicated joy. And as we'll see next, that joy takes remarkably different forms depending on where in the world you unwrap your chocolate. From the clinical health debates and laboratory studies, our chocolate journey now sweeps across continents to discover how different cultures have embraced, adapted, and reinvented this magical bean. While the health experts argue, the world has been busy creating a stunning tapestry of chocolate traditions that reflect local tastes, histories, and imaginations, proving that chocolate is truly a universal language with countless dialects. The air in a Oaxacan market in southern Mexico smells of smoke, chili, and ancient memory. Here, chocolate never lost its connection to its Mesoamerican roots. Women still grind cacao on stone metates, the rhythmic scraping sound echoing through centuries. But what they're making isn't a fancy craft bar, it's chocolate de mesa, table chocolate, formed into rough, fragrant tablets. This chocolate isn't for snacking. It's for drinking, just as the Maya and Aztecs intended, but with a distinctly Mexican twist. They blend it with cinnamon, almonds, and most importantly, plenty of sugar now, but often still with that kick of chili. The result is a gritty, intense drink that's simultaneously sweet, spicy, and deeply earthy. It's the taste of history that refused to be colonized. Meanwhile, in the same country, you'll find mole, that complex, dark sauce where chocolate isn't the star, but a crucial supporting actor. It melds with dozens of spices, chilies, and nuts to create something savory, rich, and utterly unexpected. Chocolate here isn't dessert, it's dinner. Cross the ocean to Belgium and the atmosphere changes completely. The air in a Brussels chocolatier is cool, dry, and smells of nothing but pure, tempered cocoa. This is the kingdom of the praline. Belgian chocolate isn't about ancient traditions, it's about perfectionism and innovation. Jean Neuhaus invented the chocolate praline here in 1912, a hard chocolate shell protecting a soft, liquid filling. The Belgians turned chocolate into architecture. Each piece is a tiny, edible sculpture, filled with everything from coffee cream to hazelnut paste, to more exotic flavors like passion fruit or speculoos. Then there's the Belgian hot chocolate, not a powder, but an actual chocolate bar melted into steamed milk. It's so thick your spoon could stand up in it. This is chocolate as luxury, as precision engineering, as something to be admired before it's consumed. But perhaps the most surprising chocolate transformation happens in Japan. Walk into a Japanese convenience store and you'll find chocolate that has been completely reimagined for the Japanese palate. The Kit Kats here aren't just candy bars, they're cultural phenomena. In flavors like green tea, soy sauce, strawberry cheesecake, and even wasabi. Each region has its own specialty flavor. They've become good luck charms for students. The name sounds like Kito Katsu or You Will Surely Win. Japanese chocolate tends to be less sweet, more focused on delicate, subtle flavors and perfect texture. Their chocolate-covered potato chips are a masterclass in balancing sweet and salty. Here, chocolate isn't just adapted. It's absorbed and transformed into something uniquely Japanese, where tradition and hypermodernity coexist in a single bite. Then there are the places where chocolate is eaten closest to its source. In Ghana and Ivory Coast, the world's largest cacao producers, you'll find chocolate that tastes completely different from the European versions. It's often darker, fruitier, with more robust flavors that haven't been smoothed away by extensive conching. In Brazil, they make brigadeiros, simple fudge-like truffles made from condensed milk, cocoa powder and butter, rolled in chocolate sprinkles. They're the taste of every birthday party and family gathering. In the Philippines, they have tablea, similar to Mexican drinking chocolate, but often made with locally grown cacao that has its own distinct, slightly fruity profile. What becomes clear as you travel the world through chocolate is that every culture has taken this ingredient and made it their own. The Swiss perfected milk chocolate's creaminess. The Americans turned it into convenient candy bars. The French elevated it to high art. The Mexicans preserved its ancient soul. And new traditions are being invented every day, from chili-infused chocolate in the American Southwest to curry-spiced chocolate in London's avant-garde chocolatiers. Chocolate has become a culinary chameleon, adapting to local tastes while never losing its essential magic. It proves that great ingredients don't have one right way to be enjoyed. They have thousands. And as we look toward chocolate's future, this global diversity may just hold the key to its survival in a changing climate and evolving marketplace. From the vibrant global tapestry of chocolate traditions, our journey now turns toward an uncertain future. The very existence of chocolate, this 4,000-year-old obsession, faces its greatest challenge yet, as climate change, disease, and economic pressures threaten the fragile cacao tree. But even as storms gather on the horizon, scientists, farmers and chocolatiers are racing to reinvent chocolate for a new century, blending ancient wisdom with cutting-edge innovation to ensure this magical bean survives. The air in a cacao research station in Costa Rica smells of damp earth and quiet urgency. Scientists in rubber boots move between rows of cacao trees, carefully noting which varieties withstand the latest fungal outbreak. This isn't academic curiosity, it's a race against time. Cacao trees are incredibly fragile. They grow only within 20 degrees of the equator, need specific shade and humidity, and are vulnerable to everything from fungal diseases like frosty pod rot to climate change-induced drought. In West Africa, where most of the world's chocolate originates, rising temperatures could make current cacao-growing regions unsuitable within decades. The very geography of chocolate is shifting beneath our feet. Meanwhile, the average cacao farmer still lives in poverty, earning less than $1 a day. The next generation looks at their parents' struggling farms and sees no future in chocolate. The entire supply chain, from bean to bar, is under threat and the clock is ticking. But in laboratories and experimental farms, solutions are taking root. Geneticists are mapping the cacao genome, identifying traits for disease resistance and drought tolerance. They're not creating GMO chocolate yet, but rather using traditional breeding techniques to develop hardier, more productive trees. In Brazil, researchers are testing agroforestry systems where cacao grows alongside timber trees, fruit crops, and medicinal plants. This creates a more resilient ecosystem, provides farmers with multiple income streams, and even improves the flavor of the beans. The chocolate of the future might not come from vast monoculture plantations, but from diverse, shade-grown forests that benefit both people and the planet. The innovation isn't just happening on the farm. In a Berlin laboratory that smells more of a craft brewery than a chocolate factory, food scientists are working on the most radical chocolate alternative yet, bean-free chocolate. They're using fermentation to create chocolate flavor compounds from other ingredients, perhaps carob or even upcycled food waste. The goal isn't to replace fine chocolate, but to create a sustainable alternative for mass-market confections. Meanwhile, in California, another company is using cellular agriculture to grow cacao cells in bioreactors, completely bypassing the need for cacao trees altogether. It sounds like science fiction, but it raises profound questions. If it tastes like chocolate and melts like chocolate, is it chocolate? The very definition of what we call chocolate may be about to change. Back in the craft chocolate world, the bean-to-bar movement is evolving into tree-to-bar, with companies owning their entire supply chain from the orchard to the finished bar. This allows for unprecedented quality control and ensures farmers receive living wages. Technology is creating new levels of transparency too. Some chocolate bars now come with QR codes that let you trace your specific bar back to the farmer who grew the beans, creating a direct connection between consumer and grower that would have been impossible a decade ago. Perhaps the most exciting innovations are happening with flavor itself. Chocolate makers are experimenting with novel fermentation techniques, using specific yeast strains to create entirely new flavor profiles. Some are exploring different roasting methods, while others are pushing the boundaries of inclusion ingredients. Not just nuts and fruits, but things like miso, seaweed, or even insects for protein. The chocolate bar of 2050 might be a climate-resilient, ethically sourced, nutritionally fortified bar with flavors we can't even imagine today. The future of chocolate hangs in the balance between tradition and innovation, between the ancient rhythms of the farm and the urgent demands of a changing world. But if there's one thing chocolate's long history teaches us, it's that this magical bean has always adapted, always transformed, always found new ways to delight us. The challenges are real, but so is the human ingenuity being marshaled to meet them. The story of chocolate isn't ending, it's entering its most fascinating chapter yet. And as we prepare to conclude our journey, we find ourselves back where we started, marveling at this incredible substance that has captivated humanity for millennia, and will likely continue to do so for millennia to come. From the laboratories and experimental farms where chocolate's future is being forged, our journey now comes full circle. We've followed this magical bean across 4 millennia, through sacred rituals and royal courts, industrial revolutions and world wars. And now we return to where it all began, to the simple, timeless act of breaking a piece of chocolate and letting it melt on your tongue. Just think about it. Right now, in this moment, you can participate in a ritual that spans centuries and continents. The only sound is the gentle crinkle of foil and the satisfying snap as you break off a piece. As that flavor unfolds on your tongue, bitter, sweet, complex, it contains echoes of Mayan kings drinking frothy cocoa from golden goblets and Spanish monks secretly sipping it during midnight prayers. You can almost hear the chatter of London gamblers placing bets in smoke-filled chocolate houses, and imagine soldiers finding a moment of comfort in a de-ration bar. You are tasting history. You are tasting human ingenuity, obsession and desire, all distilled into a single perfect substance. The journey from the humid Olmec forests to your hand is one of the most remarkable stories humans have ever told, and it's a story we're still writing with every bar we unwrap. What is it about chocolate that has captivated us for so long? Perhaps it's the alchemy of its creation, that a bitter, slimy seed can be transformed through fermentation, roasting and grinding into something so complex and comforting. Or maybe it's the chemistry, those 600 flavor compounds and mood-altering substances that speak directly to our brains in a language of pleasure and nostalgia. But I think it's something deeper. Chocolate has always been more than just food. For the Maya, it was a bridge to the gods. For the Aztecs, it was power and currency. For Europeans, it was a symbol of sophistication and status. For soldiers, it was a taste of home. And for us, it's love, celebration, consolation, reward. It's the one food we've assigned almost human emotions to. The universal gift, the shared pleasure, the silent understanding between people that sometimes words aren't enough. But chocolate is. Yet, chocolate's story is also a mirror reflecting our own contradictions. It's a tale of sacred rituals and brutal exploitation, of Quaker ethics and colonial oppression, of mass production and artisanal revival. We've seen chocolate as both medicine and vice, a superfood and a guilty pleasure. We've watched it transform from a bitter, cold drink reserved for kings to a sweet, solid bar available to everyone. But through every single transformation, chocolate has retained its essential magic, its ability to comfort, to delight, to connect us across time and space. The fact that we're still arguing about its health benefits, still inventing new ways to enjoy it, and still willing to pay premium prices for the good stuff, proves that this 4,000-year-old relationship is as vibrant as ever. As you sit there with that melting chocolate on your tongue, consider this: the future of chocolate rests not just with scientists and farmers, but with you. The choices we make as consumers, whether to buy the cheap bar or the ethically sourced one, whether to support the small craft maker or the industrial giant, will determine what chocolate becomes in the next century. Will it become a rare luxury, a memory of something that was once abundant? Or will innovation and sustainability ensure that children 100 years from now can still know the simple joy of unwrapping their first chocolate bar? The story isn't over. The next chapter is being written right now, in research stations and small workshops, in supermarket aisles and in your own kitchen. So the next time you break off a piece of chocolate, remember everything it represents. Remember the hands that harvested the beans, the centuries of experimentation that perfected its form, and the cultures that shaped its meaning. Remember that you're holding not just candy, but history. You're participating in a human tradition as old as civilization itself. From the steaming jungles of ancient Mesoamerica to the cool alpine factories, from the brutal colonial plantations to the bright laboratories of tomorrow, every single piece of chocolate contains this entire epic journey. And somehow, despite everything, it still manages to be simply wonderfully delicious. Ultimately, the story of chocolate is the story of us. Our ingenuity, our flaws, our desires, and our endless capacity to find joy in the most unexpected places. And that is a story worth savoring, one sweet melting piece at a time. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through the world of chocolate. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more fascinating histories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you with us for the next adventure. Until then, stay curious.